Nine Network's coverage of the economy and entrepreneurship in the St. Louis region is supported by the law firm of Polsinelli.
St. Louis has its sights set on being a world leader in agricultural tech. Incubators, high-tech facilities, and venture capital are bringing businesses from halfway across the globe to set up shop right here in St. Louis. But can we continue to thrive if our largest ag company is sold? Joining us in the studio tonight, Jacob Barker from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Don Rubin, the president and CEO of BioSTL, Katie Jamberetz from the STO Partnership, and Matt Plummer from the Yield Lab. The opportunities in ag tech seem to be sprouting everywhere, but is St. Louis as a region able to sustain our status on the world stage? Stay tuned. Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the Nine Network of Public Media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. When Bayer announced plans to purchase Monsanto for $66 billion last month, the offer came with a lot of questions about what that would mean for St. Louis's agribusiness ecosystem. Could some jobs move? Could some spin off into new startup ventures like we've seen after mergers in other industries? Years before any mention of a Monsanto sale, the ag tech sector in St. Louis was already growing, with access to world-class facilities like the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center and incubators like the Helix Center. Lab space for these small agribusiness startups has filled up fast. Do we have the capacity to support more? Should we be worried about talent leaving town if Monsanto is sold? Can St. Louis keep and continue to grow its role in the worldwide business of feeding the planet? Jacob, catch us up, because we've seen Monsanto and Bayer in the headlines, but we haven't heard, at least I haven't, much lately. Where is this potential deal right now?
Well, it's going to take a long time. It's got to go through antitrust review. The deal is not supposed to close until close to the end of next year. Right now, it's going through the regulatory process, and we haven't really heard much over the last month since it was announced.
Are we operating as if it will happen, or does it feel like it's a done deal? This is the world that you guys operate in. What do you know? What do you hear?
You know, I think that I understand the market is not sure if it's going to happen because it's trading at a significant discount from where the closing price would be. You know, in addition to the votes that need to happen, the antitrust hurdles, country by country across the world, will be, you know, multiple hurdles for the deal to go through. But I think we have to operate as if it will happen. Okay, so it does happen. I know there's some anxious people, and you speak privately with people who work there. They're anxious, but I think just maybe St. Louis in general. What happens? What do you know from your reporting? What happens to the St. Louis ag tech sector?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that the intellectual capital we have here, the scientists who work at Monsanto, most of them are probably safe because that's what Bayer was buying when they bought Monsanto. But when you have these big corporate mergers, there is going to be overlap, especially in you know, legal, accounting, kind of the corporate headquarters jobs. And I mean, some of those will probably go away.
But we see it like a Nestle Purina. When Nestle bought, everyone was very unsure of what would happen, but it's grown significantly. There were 300 plus jobs added this year. And when you have the people here that are the core of what you need, that grows. So we think we have the talented people here to keep growing if this merger does happen. So I think if you look at how many plant scientists are here, we're the world leader. If this continues to grow, we see us being a part of Bayer if that goes through.
And I want to talk more about the possibilities, but I mean, you can't say things didn't go great for the advertising industry when Anheuser-Busch was bought by InBev, for instance. There could be some economic backlash.
Yeah, I think there's always ups and downs in any situation. Where's the balance going to be? I think I'll go along with some of the conventional wisdom as Jake described it. You know, Werner Baumann, who's the CEO of Bayer, said that the reason that they find Monsanto attractive is the science, it is the innovation capacity, and that is centered here in St. Louis. So it's about the talent more than anything else. Not to mention a huge, hundreds of millions of dollars investment in physical infrastructure that Monsanto has made just recently. I think that there's always the loss of prestige when you lose a corporate headquarters, and it's hard to put a value on prestige and some of the intangibles that go with that. But I think we are in good stead in terms of keeping the science, growing the science. There are going to be probably 3 mega ag corporations left in the world after this merger, the Dow and DuPont merger, and then Syngenta was acquired by a Chinese company. 3 mega companies, and St. Louis is going to be a major part of one of those 3 companies. And with Bayer stating that the seeds and traits business will be world headquartered here in St. Louis, and it's a North American commercial headquarters for the entire Bayer portfolio will be based in St. Louis. We stand possibly to gain a significant amount. It's just hard to say exactly how that will pan out, and there will certainly be uncertainty in the meantime.
And I think from the economic development standpoint, we've had great talks with Bayer. The county executive, Steve Stanger, has met personally with Bayer on several occasions, and my boss, Sheila Sweeney, has flown to Germany, met with them in person before this happened and after it happened. And they're really indicating that they're very bullish on St. Louis. They realize that St. Louis has some expertise that can be found nowhere else in the world.
And I would just comment on that, the work that Don and his organization has done, BioSTL, BioGenerator, the partnership, all of the infrastructure that they've put in place to help prop up these early stage ag tech businesses have really shown their true colors recently. So I'm with the Yield Lab just right across the street from Monsanto, and I've had people walk into our office, recent departures from Monsanto, looking to network, looking to see what's out there. And some of these folks have already been scooped up by some of our portfolio companies, and I'm sure some of the portfolio companies out of the BioGenerator portfolio as well.
So there could be a second act for some folks.
Some of the startups that are going on in this space are unbelievably brilliant, and they are coming out of the ag companies with a wealth of experience and walking into some of the startups with unbelievable depth of knowledge in the seed industry, and they're able to marketize it.
Monsanto has been a magnet for talent for St. Louis worldwide for decades, really. And if you look at startups around the community in ag and even in other areas of bioscience and a tremendous amount the resumes of so many people in these startups include Monsanto on them. Monsanto has been a training ground for a lot of people. So St. Louis has benefited from that magnet of talent, not just in the big corporations, but in the startup ecosystem. And I would see that continuing because whoever owns and is running that concentration of innovation is going to still be recruiting people from all over the world into St. Louis. And if we see an exodus in the interim of some talent into small companies or even beginning to start their own companies, it could be a case of lemonade out of lemons. It could be a real nice silver lining. We saw that several years ago when Pfizer downsized in St. Louis. And we were concerned about losing a tremendous amount of scientific and business talent to other parts of the country. A lot of organizations, the universities, corporations, and entrepreneur support organizations stepped up, and that was in fact the impetus for why we opened up our shared lab space, the BioGenerator labs that are in the Cortex district. It was really to capture a lot of that Pfizer talent that wanted to stay in St. Louis. Some of that talent had an entrepreneurial bent, wanted to start companies, and we've been able to give them a path forward with very inexpensive or even free laboratory space, shared equipment to be able to start their own companies. And now we have dozens of those former Pfizer people who are populating our bioscience startups in St. Louis. I would predict that we might see the same kind of thing with Monsanto, even if we see ultimately growth in the innovation operation of Bayer/Monsanto. We could still see individuals who, because of uncertainty or otherwise, might find it a time for themselves to step out, move into the entrepreneurial world, try the startup scene, and we could benefit from an array of new companies seeded by that activity.
You can imagine the amazing ideas they have. They've had a wealth of experience. That's what St. Louis is really, really good at, is that they have these corporate executives that have incredible wealth of knowledge about an industry. You know, we have several things that we're very good at here: biosciences, plant science, financial services. So if you're somebody who has spent a career in that, you have a lot of ideas of like what you would do if you had the ability to do a startup. So that's the potential of it. That's the exciting part of it.
So maybe we need to back up just a little bit and tell me what's going on here in St. Louis, because when we think ag tech, for most folks, we might just think it's Monsanto, but we think we just saw some video there from across the street at the Danforth Center. So maybe lay the groundwork and get us all on the same page. What's happening in this town that your company would want to invest in companies that are doing stuff in ag tech?
Yeah, so well, I think you know, one of the reasons why we started here in St. Louis was just our proximity to agricultural resources of the entire Midwest, and St. Louis is really the center of that. With Biogenerator's been operating for I think about 10 years now, and has produced some very strong ag tech companies. The partnership has put together great infrastructural resources. But really what we saw is we saw companies, not just in St. Louis, but across the world and across the country, that really weren't getting the early stage capital that they really needed. And we saw St. Louis as a great spot to begin out on that venture. There's that wealth of knowledge and experience that really brings value to the companies, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a mentorship and a business development standpoint.
And does that hold water from what you're seeing? And I mean, we have very positive people at the table, and we need positive people in our lives. But do we truly have a place on the world stage when it comes to ag?
Well, as Don mentioned, I mean, Bayer has committed to keeping the seeds and traits business here in St. Louis, so we'll continue to attract those types of researchers and everything. We still have the Danforth Center. We have tremendous anchor research institutions in Washington University and the University of Missouri system. So those resources aren't going anywhere.
I think that if this had happened 15 years ago, we would be much more concerned. Mm-hmm. 15 years ago, Monsanto really was not just the anchor of the plant science community, but you know, it was the only real visible asset that we had. Fast forward 15 years, and we now have a very robust ecosystem in the plant sciences. Across the street from Monsanto, we have the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, as has been mentioned, which is the world's largest independent research institute focused on plant science. It didn't exist more than 15 years ago. It actually opened up in 2001. There are a lot of startups and organizations like Yield Lab, so we have investors with expertise, industry expertise, is not found in other parts of the country. Yield Lab is a very unique organization. You look at the grower organizations around the country that are headquartered in St. Louis, the American Soybean Association, the National Corn Growers Association. The investors, the entrepreneurs, we have found it to be a great story to tell overseas. You asked about the world stage. So we launched an initiative about 2 years ago called Global STL to attract companies to St. Louis from Israel and now from Ireland and the UK and other places. And the area that we have had the most traction so far has been in the plant sciences, in ag tech. We have 4 Israeli ag tech companies that have put their US headquarters here in St. Louis in the last 2 years. And these are not just run-of-the-mill companies. These are the most sophisticated and respected companies in Israel, which is a hotbed for ag tech itself, innovation. And we're having the same kind of, getting the same kind of attention from Ireland. Yield Lab is also active in Ireland. We found a tremendous amount of world-leading ag tech innovation, and they're looking to St. Louis as the premier place in North America to put a location. Not just because of Monsanto, but because of the Danforth Center and the facilities that they make available to a company, facilities like greenhouses and very high-tech growth chambers and other instrumentation that would never be available to them in any other setting.
No.
Go ahead.
Oh, no doubt things are much better than they were 10 years ago. We have organizations like Yield Lab, that we've got a couple of VC firms, venture capital firms, we've got a number of angel investors. But at the same time, in Danforth Center, I mean, one of the early investors in a lot of these efforts was Monsanto. And when the corporate headquarters is somewhere else, those decisions won't be made in St. Louis. Those same connections on, you know, where those philanthropic dollars are going to go won't necessarily be made in St. Louis. Obviously, Bayer will still have an interest in growing the ecosystem here because some of those companies, those smaller startups, could eventually be acquired, but it'll be more removed.
So a question of, has the train gotten enough momentum to go without the engine of Monsanto?
So one comment I would like to make too is agriculture, I've seen blur the lines between IT, information technology, as well as life sciences. And one of the value propositions that St. Louis also brings to the table, aside from its stronghold in agriculture, is the rise of organizations like LaunchCode. Information technology, education organizations are bringing more people to St. Louis. On the medtech side, BioGenerator also invests heavily in medtech. And so you've got these organizations where agriculture can leverage, you know, both sides of the coin, information technology as well as biotechnology, especially on the human health side.
Some startups can get a co-working space. They just need they don't even need a telephone line. They just need a desk and maybe a cool place to host clients. You need a little, we're looking at that video we just saw there. You mentioned some high-tech stuff. Do we have that? Do we have that space if someone wants to start their own startup and they have the greenhouse, they have access to the other technical stuff that it takes?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a challenge in the community right now, and that's a part of a good story. You know,
Good problem to have.
Well, it's a problem to solve,
Right.
but it's a good problem to have in that 15 years ago when we started this effort to build the innovation ecosystem, there was not space for startup companies. And a lot of that had been solved with a lot of interesting space that's available now. The Helix Center, which the St. Louis Partnership manages and invests in, which is in St. Louis County. We have our BioGenerator labs in the Cortex District, which we now have 50 companies sharing that lab space. But we're virtually all full. The fact that we're full is a really good story because we have so many, we're teaming with really strong startups in St. Louis now, some of which aren't going to succeed, but some of which are going to be our next really big employers, which is a great story. But now we have to move to the next level and solve the new problem, is that we're full and we still see companies coming from overseas. If these Monsanto spins off individuals that start new companies, we need to make sure we have a place to put those. And we have some short-term challenges. I'm pleased to say that we've had conversations with the St. Louis Partnership, with our organization, the BioGenerator, about creating what I would call a BioGenerator West. We have the mostly drug discovery, medical device companies focused in the Cortex District near the medical schools. Mm-hmm. And we would do a similar kind of a model in Creve Coeur that's more focused on ag tech with shared equipment that we could provide for free to very early startups. And as they grow and develop the wherewithal to pay rent, they can move out into adjacent space and create kind of concentric circles of companies as they mature and really develop a very robust community of startups. We have that started in that district with the Helix Center. Bridge Park has more mature companies, but there's room for a lot more development in that area around the Monsanto World Headquarters and the Danforth Center.
And I think from a financial perspective, Jacob mentioned it earlier. You know, we've had a rise of Cultivation Capital, Prologue Ventures here in town, Lewis and Clark Ventures, BioGenerator hits the early scene.
The money.
The money, yes, and the money is truly on a momentum trajectory.
Because we hear in a lot of startup talk outside of the ag stuff that when you get to a certain point, you got to go to the coast.
That's slowly changing.
It is. I mean, some of the Helix Center
Yeah.
companies have had incredible raises in the last 12 months. I mean, $70 million raises, $35 million raises, big
Yeah,
stuff.
To be fair, though, and this is not a bad thing, some of those companies are in our portfolio, and in the last several years, last 2 years at least, over 80% of the dollars coming into these companies are coming from outside St. Louis. And that is a good thing. As long as our companies can, I mean, this is money being imported into St. Louis that then is being devoted to payroll, buying goods and services in St. Louis. It's creating economic activity in St. Louis. The key is, can we keep attracting that outside money? And that comes down to great ideas and great people to manage those
And
ideas.
access, I think what BioSTL has been really good at doing, and we took a trade mission to Boston this past week with Accelerate St. Louis, is that we don't just say, hey, you should raise money. We actually take you to the funders. So we take our best startups to the places where there is money in the ag space. So I think that's important.
And if you just look at St. Louis from a cost of living perspective, your dollar goes 2 times, if not 3 times, as further here in St. Louis than it would on the coast. Yeah, you might be able to raise more money, but if you look at a burn rate or a run rate, those dollars aren't going to last you as long as they would here in St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, part of the secret sauce for St. Louis in competing with other places is that we call it capital efficiency. Right? Your money goes a lot further. We don't like to say low cost, but capital efficient. But also the access and attention that a company can get if they come to St. Louis that they could never get in a
Get
Boston or
plugged
New
in.
York or San Francisco. St. Louis is a very networked, collaborative community. Maybe it's partly the Midwest sensibilities, but people are so willing to open up their, I say Rolodex, but that's kind of antiquated. I still have a Rolodex, but
Do you really?
not really, no. But, my Outlook content, but people are willing to open,
Their
make
contacts,
make
they're
introductions,
willing to do
make
make
introductions, and connect people to resources. And so we have had companies come here from overseas who are blown away by the people that they can meet and the decision makers that they can meet in 48 hours in St. Louis. They could spend 6 months in Boston knocking on doors and never have that access. So that brings us back to the comment that Jake made about decision makers. When you think about Monsanto, will the decision makers still be in St. Louis? Because decision makers are who people want to meet with. And it's not just Monsanto, it's a whole array, but I do certainly hope that when all the dust settles, that key decision makers on the innovation side for Monsanto/Bayer will be here in St. Louis.
Can you put it in perspective how much of our economic future is riding on specifically the ag tech? Because we talk about a changing economy in St. Louis. Have you thought about this?
Well, I mean, it's obviously one of the areas that regional leaders have targeted for growth. It's one of our strengths, and it's a place that we've put a lot of resources into growing because they're good paying jobs. It attracts a lot of outside investment. When you look at the impact, I guess, Monsanto has directly, they employ about 4,100 people in the St. Louis area, so which is a lot, but I mean it's not enormous. That we would, if 4,000 jobs left, we would feel it, but we've lost thousands of jobs at one point before.
Well, we do in economic development see it as our key economic driver. I mean,
The ag side of it.
The ag side of it, without a doubt. We have a lot of good sectors here: financial services, IT, tech, biosciences, biomedical, but we're the world leader in ag. We're the undisputed world leader in ag, and we can say that without question. And we think that's our biggest selling point.
People may not realize that or think that right away because you don't see a lot of, you don't see combines
That's
in
what
the
I'm going to try and
Chesterfield Valley.
change. That's my goal of the next
You
year.
see them within what's the radius within 500 miles of St. Louis.
About 500 miles, 30% of the world's corn and soybeans are grown in that area.
So
And
we are in the middle of the agriculture belt, where the other tech centers, the Silicon Valleys, the Bostons are not. So that's an
And
advantage.
actually, if you're driving west down 40 and you drop into the Chesterfield Valley,
You will see
right
on
off
the
the
north
right,
side.
you're going to see a combine
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
It's still alive and well, even with inside St. Louis County borders.
More importantly, we have the most plant scientists of anywhere in the world. Like that's what the
The
companies,
the intellectual part of the ag
property.
stuff.
So we have the most plant scientists, which means we believe in economic development. This has been our strongest driver: is that we can go around the world and convince other companies to come here because they want to hire the people who had the expertise and they work here. So this has been truly an incredible thing to attract companies like KWS, a German company, open their first North American headquarters here across the street from Monsanto, their direct competitor, because they wanted to be where the science was. And we've seen Israeli companies in droves that Don and BioSTL has helped attract come to the Helix Center and to the Plant Science District. So I think it's without a doubt, when you hear the county executive, Steve Stanger, talk about it, he absolutely believes this is our key economic driver for the next 10, 20 years, and they're resourcing it very heavily to build this plant science district in Creve Coeur to attract new people.
Yeah, you asked about sectors, so our portfolio includes ag tech, but also medical and healthcare. It's a big part of what we do. And there's probably, even though we have the most plant scientists in the world, we probably have 10 times as many medical scientists in St. Louis, at least 6 or 7 times as many medical scientists in St. Louis. There's a tremendous amount of dollars coming into St. Louis from federal research institutes, et cetera, to fund medical research in St. Louis. So there's more medical research happening in St. Louis than there is plant science research. But there are lots of centers in this country of medical research and of healthcare. So we compete with Boston and Baltimore and Nashville and lots of places. Whereas, like Katie said, when it comes to plant science, it's a little bit smaller of a niche, but it is something we can really call out as a strength, a unique strength that St. Louis has.
And the world is only getting more populated and needs more food, I guess. We have about, just so you know, we have about 45 seconds left, but go ahead.
I guess how I'll wrap up is, agriculture, ag tech, at least, for the purposes of this conversation, have been focused primarily around plant science, and that's what St. Louis is really strong in. But there has been a significant rise in other technologies, animal health and nutrition, software, data, precision agricultural services. And so as Don, the partnership, myself, and all the other organizations that are surrounded by agriculture really push St. Louis to be the world capital of this, we're going to start seeing more animal health. We're going to start seeing more precision agriculture as well.
20 seconds left. Katie, I'll give it to you. What do we need to be doing going forward?
Well, I think the tech part of it is the fascinating part because it's the technology that is making the sector take off. I mean, it is where it all comes together. The ag district will start being built this year, this upcoming year.
Thank you all very much.